Part 1, The Discovery. 15-year-old Lily Martinez never imagined that one small mistake would change everything. Not just for her, but for the entire human race. She was just an intern at the Galactic Archaeological Institute, a massive research facility where aliens from across the galaxy studied ancient artifacts. Most days, she just filed reports and brought coffee to scientists who barely noticed she existed. But today was different. Her supervisor, an irritable beetle-like creature named Tix, had barked at her to go fetch a cataloging scanner from the restricted warehouse. The restricted section. The place where interns were never supposed to go alone. But Tix was in a foul mood, and Lily wasn't about to argue with someone who had mandibles that could snap metal. The warehouse was enormous, stretching so far back that the lights couldn't reach the end. Row after row of shelves towered above her, filled with objects from civilizations that had died out thousands, sometimes millions of years ago. Broken statues. Strange weapons. Devices nobody understood anymore. It was like walking through a graveyard of entire worlds. Lily found the scanner sitting on a cluttered workbench, buried under data pads and sample containers. She reached for it carefully, trying not to disturb anything. But her sleeve caught on something sharp jutting out from beneath a tarp. Pain shot through her hand as something sliced her palm open. She yanked her arm back with a yelp, cradling her injured hand against her chest. Blood was already welling up from the cut, and she fumbled for the medical kit she knew was supposed to be nearby. But then she stopped. Really stopped. Because something was very, very wrong. The blood dripping from her hand wasn't red. It was purple. Not like a bruised purple, but shimmering, iridescent purple, like someone had mixed liquid sapphires with amethyst. It caught the dim warehouse lights and seemed to glow from within. Lily stared at her hand, her brain refusing to process what she was seeing. That wasn't possible. That wasn't human. What was wrong with her? Had she been exposed to some alien contamination? Was she dying? Before she could spiral further into panic, a single drop of her strange blood fell from her fingertip. It seemed to fall in slow motion, spinning through the air, catching the light. And then it landed. The drop hit the surface of the broken crystal she'd cut herself on. The crystal that had been sitting dark and dead for who knows how many centuries. What happened next would be burned into Lily's memory forever. The crystal exploded with light. Not like a bulb turning on, but like a star being born right there in front of her. Brilliant white light mixed with purple energy raced across its surface, an ancient symbol she'd never seen before began appearing, glowing so bright she had to shield her eyes. But it didn't stop there. The light jumped from that crystal to the next artifact, and then the next, spreading like wildfire through the warehouse. Statues that had been cold stone for millennia suddenly blazed to life. Weapons hummed with power. Tablets flickered with scrolling text in languages nobody alive could read. The entire warehouse became a light show of ancient technology screaming back to life all at once. And the noise. God, the noise. Every artifact seemed to be singing or chiming or vibrating at different frequencies, creating a sound that felt like it was coming from inside her own skull. Alarms started shrieking. The building itself began to shake. Dust rained down from the ceiling as the foundations trembled. Lily stumbled backward, her back hitting the now glowing obelisk behind her. She was terrified, confused, and still clutching her bleeding purple hand like it belonged to someone else. The warehouse door burst open with a bang that made her jump. Her supervisor Tix stood frozen in the doorway, his compound eyes so wide they looked like they might pop out of his head. Behind him, security guards from half a dozen different species came running, their weapons drawn, ready for some kind of attack. But they all stopped dead when they saw her. When they saw her hand. When they saw the purple blood still dripping onto the now active artifacts. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the humming of ancient machines and the blaring alarms. And then Tix did something Lily had never seen any alien do in the 3 months she'd been working there. He slowly, deliberately, lowered himself onto his knees. All 6 of his legs folded beneath him as he pressed his head toward the floor in what could only be described as a bow. His translator implant crackled to life, and his voice came out barely above a whisper, filled with something that sounded like awe and terror mixed together. Impossible, he breathed, his eyes still locked on her bleeding hand. The bloodline. The bloodline survived. Before Lily could ask what he meant, before she could demand answers, the other security guards began dropping to their knees too. One by one, they all prostrated themselves before her. A Thex warrior with 4 arms. A floating jellyfish creature from the water worlds. A massive armored being that looked like it was made of living rock. All of them, kneeling. Lily pressed herself harder against the glowing obelisk, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. The purple blood was still flowing from her cut, dripping onto the ancient surface behind her, making it glow even brighter. What's happening? Her voice came out high and scared, nothing like the confident tone she wished she had. What's wrong with me? Why are you all? Stop looking at me like that. But they didn't stop. They didn't move. They just stayed there, kneeling before a terrified teenager with purple blood and absolutely no idea that she'd just announced to the entire galaxy that humanity's biggest secret had finally been revealed. The progenitors had returned. And they had no idea what was coming next. Lily didn't have time to process what was happening before everything got much worse. Within minutes, the entire facility went into lockdown. Heavy doors slammed shut throughout the building. More alarms joined the chorus already screaming through the halls. And through it all, the aliens around her stayed on their knees, refusing to look directly at her, like she was some kind of religious figure. She heard running footsteps echoing down the corridor. Heavy ones. Important ones. The kind of footsteps that belonged to people who made decisions that affected entire planets. The director of the institute burst through the doorway, moving faster than Lily had ever seen him move before. Director Vorith was old, even by his species standards. 4 arms, silver skin that shimmered like mercury, and eyes that had seen thousands of years of history. He was the kind of being that commanded respect just by entering a room. But when he saw Lily standing there, surrounded by glowing artifacts, with purple blood still dripping from her hand, he stopped like he'd run into an invisible wall. His silver eyes went wide. All 4 of his hands began trembling. And then, this ancient, powerful being who ran one of the most important research facilities in the galaxy, slowly lowered himself to one knee. "Forgive us, Scion," he said, his voice shaking. "We did not know. We could not have known that any of your kind still existed." "Stop!" Lily shouted, her voice cracking. "Stop calling me that. Stop kneeling. Just tell me what's happening to me." Tears were starting to burn in her eyes. She was 15 years old. She was supposed to be worried about homework and whether Jake from her astrophysics class liked her back. Not whatever this was. Director Vorith slowly stood, but he kept his distance, like approaching her too quickly might be disrespectful. Or dangerous. He gestured with one of his hands, and suddenly the air between them filled with holographic images. Beautiful, impossible images of beings that made Lily's breath catch in her throat. They looked almost human. Not quite, but close enough to be unsettling. Tall and elegant, with features that seemed too perfect to be real. But the most striking thing about them was the light. Purple light flowed through their veins, visible beneath translucent skin, making them glow like living lanterns. They wore clothing that seemed to be made of liquid metal, and they stood in front of structures so massive and beautiful that Lily's brain couldn't quite process the scale. 3 million years ago, Vorith began, his voice taking on the tone of someone reciting ancient history. The progenitors ruled the galaxy. Not through force or conquest, but through wisdom and kindness. They traveled from world to world, finding primitive species and helping them. Teaching them. Uplifting them from the darkness of ignorance into the light of knowledge. The images shifted, showing the progenitors working alongside dozens of different alien species. Teaching them to write. Showing them how to build. Sharing technology that transformed entire civilizations overnight. Every species that travels the stars today exists because of them, Vorith continued. They gave us written language. They showed us how to harness energy. They even altered our DNA, making us smarter, stronger, better than we would have been naturally. Every civilization in this galaxy is their child in one way or another. Lily stared at the images, trying to understand. But what does that have to do with me? Vorith's expression became grave. He manipulated the hologram, and the images changed. Now they showed the progenitors' worlds going dark. Their beautiful cities falling silent. Their ships drifting dead in space. They vanished, he said quietly. 3 million years ago, at the height of their power, they simply disappeared. Every progenitor world was found empty. Their technology was shut down or destroyed. It was the greatest mystery in galactic history. Where did they go? Why did they leave? Did something kill them, or did they choose to abandon us? He gestured to the artifacts glowing around them. They left behind only these relics. Pieces of their technology scattered across 1,000 worlds. We've been studying them for millennia, trying to understand how they worked, trying to learn their secrets. But none of it would activate. It was like trying to start a vehicle without the key. We had all these incredible pieces of technology, but they were just dead objects. Useless. Voritha's eyes locked onto Lily's bleeding hand. Until now. Until your blood touched that crystal. Lily looked down at her hand. The cut had already stopped bleeding, which was weird because it had been pretty deep. The purple shimmer was fading slightly, but it was still clearly not normal human blood. I don't understand, she said, her voice small. Are you saying I'm one of these progenitor things? That's impossible. I'm from Earth. I'm human. Are you? It was Tix who spoke, her supervisor, still kneeling but finally brave enough to look up at her. Think about it, Lily. Humans appeared out of nowhere, on a remote world that nobody had ever visited before. And within just a few thousand years, you went from living in caves to building spaceships. Does that seem natural to you? Lots of species develop quickly, Lily protested, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. Not like humans, Vorith said firmly. He brought up more data, streams of genetic code that meant nothing to Lily but clearly meant everything to him. We've been studying human biology since first contact 20 years ago. Your species has always been unusual. Your genetic code is too clean, too efficient. You have backup organs that most species don't have. Your brains are structured in ways that allow for incredibly rapid learning. You heal faster than you should. You adapt to new environments better than any species we've ever encountered. He paused, letting that sink in. We thought it was just evolution. We thought Earth had simply produced a remarkably successful species. But now we know the truth. Humans weren't shaped by natural evolution. You were designed. The word hit Lily like a physical blow. Designed. Like a tool. Like a machine. The progenitors, in their final days, must have seeded Earth with their genetic legacy, Vorith explained. They hid it well. Made you look natural, made your evolutionary history seem normal. But they left their mark in your DNA, buried deep, waiting. Humans are the progenitors' last children. Their final gift to the galaxy. Or perhaps their last desperate hope. Lily's legs felt weak. She slid down to sit on the floor, not caring that she was sitting among priceless ancient artifacts. Her mind was spinning. Everything she thought she knew about herself, about humanity, about where she came from, it was all wrong. Why? She asked quietly. Why would they do that? Why hide us on Earth for millions of years? Voritha's expression became even more serious. That, Cyan, is the question that terrifies us. Because the progenitors did not simply leave. They ran. They erased themselves from existence. And whatever made them do that, whatever scared beings that powerful so badly that they would destroy their entire civilization and hide their children on a remote world, that thing might still be out there. The artifacts around them pulsed brighter, as if responding to the fear in the room. And now, with your blood awakening these relics, that thing will know that the progenitor's children have returned. Lily looked at her purple-stained hand and realized that cutting herself on that crystal might have been the most dangerous thing any human had ever done. 3 hours later, Lily found herself sitting in what was essentially a force field bubble, floating in the center of the most important room in the entire galaxy. The Grand Council chamber was massive, with curved walls that seemed to go up forever. Hundreds of seats arranged in tiers surrounded her from all sides, and in those seats sat representatives from every major species in known space. She'd never felt so small in her entire life. Through the transparent walls of her containment field, she could see her parents in the observation gallery. They'd been pulled from their apartment on Earth with almost no explanation, just military ships showing up and saying their daughter was in a situation. Her mom kept crying. Her dad looked like he wanted to punch someone but didn't know who. Lily wanted to run to them, to hug them and tell them everything would be okay, but she wasn't sure that was true anymore. The aliens in the council chamber weren't kneeling now. Instead, they were arguing. Loudly. In a dozen different languages that her translator earpiece was struggling to keep up with. Some were shouting that she should be studied. Others were demanding she be protected. A few were suggesting she was dangerous and should be contained. And through it all, Lily just sat there, feeling like a bug under a microscope. Finally, a voice cut through the chaos. It was deep and resonant, the kind of voice that demanded attention without having to yell. Chancellor Thex rose from his central seat. He was a crystalline being, his body made of what looked like living diamond that refracted light into rainbow patterns. He was old. Really old. Older than human civilization old. And when he spoke, everyone else shut up. Enough, he said simply. We have tested the girl thoroughly. The results are undeniable. We must face the truth, no matter how impossible it seems. He gestured, and a massive holographic display appeared above Lily's head. She craned her neck to look up at it. Genetic sequences. Comparison charts. Data that she only partially understood from her accelerated learning courses. The human girl's DNA contains genetic markers that perfectly match progenitor samples taken from 17 different archive sites across the galaxy, Thex announced. The probability of this being coincidence or contamination is less than 1 in several trillion. Furthermore, her blood has activated relics on 4 separate worlds simultaneously. All of them responded the moment her blood touched that first crystal. A murmur ran through the chamber. Several aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A reptilian delegate stood up, his scales gleaming under the chamber lights. One human child with strange blood proves nothing. Perhaps it's a mutation. Perhaps some laboratory experiment went wrong. The humans have only been part of our community for 20 years. They are still primitive in many ways. Maybe they were experimenting with progenitor DNA samples and created this girl artificially. That's ridiculous. Lily's dad shouted from the gallery, standing up despite the guards trying to get him to sit back down. My daughter is natural born. We have her birth records, her baby pictures, her whole life documented. But another voice cut in before anyone could respond. This one belonged to Ambassador Kess, a tall, elegant being wrapped in what looked like living mist. She had a reputation for being brilliant and absolutely ruthless when it came to uncovering truth. With respect, Councillor Vex, you're choosing to ignore overwhelming evidence because it frightens you, Kess said coolly. She waved her hand and the holographic display changed, showing even more data. I took the liberty of authorizing a deep analysis of human genetics. Not just this girl, but samples from across their entire population. The display now showed hundreds of genetic sequences, all arranged in a pattern that even Lily could see was significant. Humans share 43% genetic similarity with the progenitor baseline, Kess continued. For context, the species with the next highest similarity shares only 8%. That's not coincidence. That's design. She brought up more images. Furthermore, humans possess biological features that make no sense for a naturally evolved species. They have redundant organ systems that provide backup functionality if one fails. Their healing capabilities are enhanced beyond what their environment should have produced. Their neurological structure allows for pattern recognition and learning speeds that exceed species that have been studying and advancing for thousands of years longer. Kess turned to face the council directly. And let's address the elephant in the room, as the humans would say. 20 years ago, humanity discovered faster-than-light travel independently. They built working FTL drives within a single century of achieving industrial revolution. Do you understand how insane that is? Most species take thousands of years to reach that point. Some never reach it at all without outside help. The chamber fell silent. Even the reptilian counselor sat back down, looking troubled. Humans didn't discover us, Kess said quietly. They found us. As if some part of them always knew we were out here, waiting. Lily's mom stood up in the gallery, her voice shaking. What are you saying about us? About my daughter? Are you saying we're not real? That we're some kind of artificial species? Kess's expression softened slightly. No, I'm saying that you're exactly what the progenitors intended you to be. Natural, but guided. Hidden, but prepared. They didn't create automatons. They created children and set them up to survive on their own. She pulled up more data. We've accessed Earth's historical records going back thousands of years. Your species has documented its own anomalies without understanding what they meant. Blood types that shouldn't exist according to your own evolutionary biology. Individuals throughout history with abilities that defied explanation, people your own scientists called savants or prodigies. Archaeological sites that predate your supposed evolutionary timeline by hundreds of thousands of years. Ancient structures built with precision that shouldn't have been possible with primitive tools. She paused. You've been explaining away evidence of your true nature for your entire recorded history, calling it mythology, calling it mystery, calling it anything except what it actually was, proof that you were never quite as natural as you believed. Another council member stood. This one was more humanoid, with blue skin and silver hair. What about the cultural evidence? If humans are truly progenitor descendants, surely there would be some memory, some legend passed down. Lily's mom suddenly went pale. Her hand moved to her neck, to the simple necklace she always wore. Lily had seen that necklace her entire life. Her mom never took it off, said it was a family heirloom passed down through generations. The pendant, her mom whispered. My grandmother gave it to me. She said it came from the ancient ones. I always thought she meant our ancestors from old Mexico, but she used to say strange things about them. She'd say they were watchers, that they were waiting for something. Security was already moving. Within minutes, they had the necklace in an analysis chamber. The results came back almost immediately. Director Voratha's voice was shaken when he announced it. Progenitor origin. Approximately 50,000 years old. It's a genetic marker, designed to identify and activate in the presence of specific DNA sequences. The entire council chamber erupted. Aliens were shouting in multiple languages. Some were standing, some were sitting in shocked silence, others were frantically communicating with their home worlds. Chancellor Thex had to use a sound-dampening field to restore order. When the chamber finally fell silent again, he looked directly at Lily. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, someone was actually looking at her like she was a person and not a scientific curiosity. Child, he said gently, do you understand what this means? Not just for you, but for your entire species. Lily's throat was tight. She managed to nod. Humanity is not a new species joining our galactic community, Thex said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. Humanity is the return of the progenitors. The sleeping children have awakened. And throughout history, whenever children wake up, the monsters that scared them into hiding wake up too. The chamber fell silent. The weight of those words settled over everyone like a physical thing. Lily looked at her parents, both of them holding each other in the gallery, looking terrified and confused. She thought about Earth, billions of people going about their daily lives, completely unaware that everything they knew about themselves was about to change. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a new fear began to grow. If the progenitors had been so powerful, so advanced, so incredible, what could possibly have scared them enough to make them erase themselves from existence? What was coming? 3 days after the council session, Lily stood in a room she never knew existed. The Hall of Memory, they called it. It was buried deep beneath the Institute, protected by security systems that could probably withstand a nuclear blast. And for good reason. This room contained the most complete collection of progenitor artifacts in the known galaxy. Around her stood the smartest beings from 40 different species. Historians, scientists, linguists, military strategists. They'd been working non-stop since her blood activated the relics, trying to decode messages that had been silent for 3 million years. And what they found was terrifying. The cut on Lily's hand had healed completely, but it left something behind. A thin silver scar that glowed faintly in the dark, like someone had drawn a line on her palm with liquid moonlight. Every time she looked at it, she was reminded that she wasn't quite human anymore. Or maybe she was finally becoming what humans were always meant to be. We've made a breakthrough, Archivist Quinn announced, his tentacles dancing across holographic controls. Quinn was a squid-like being from the deep water worlds, and he was apparently the galaxy's leading expert on dead languages. The relics weren't just technology. They were a message system. A warning beacon designed to activate only when specific conditions were met. The holographic display in the center of the room shifted, showing a timeline that stretched back millions of years. Lily watched as it zoomed in on a point 3 million years in the past. The golden age of the progenitors. This is when they were at their peak, Quinn explained. They controlled thousands of worlds, not through conquest but through cooperation. They were explorers, teachers, scientists. They were everything we aspired to be. The timeline showed the progenitors' territory, a vast network of connected worlds spreading across multiple spiral arms of the galaxy. It was beautiful. Peaceful. Then the warnings started appearing. Red markers spreading across the progenitor network like a disease. They detected something, Quinn continued, his voice growing darker. Something coming from beyond the edge of known space. At first, they thought it was just another species to contact, to help, to welcome into their community. They sent ships to investigate. The display showed progenitor vessels heading toward the red markers. Every single one went dark. None of them came back, Quinn said quietly. Not one. No distress signals. No debris. They just vanished. So the progenitors sent more ships, better equipped, with their best scientists and warriors. Same result. Gone. Lily felt a chill run down her spine. What was it? What did they find? Director Vorath stepped forward, all 4 of his hands clasped in front of him like he was at a funeral. They called it the Silence. And that name is unfortunately very literal. Every civilization it touched simply stopped. No battles. No fighting. No explosions or destruction. Just silence. Worlds full of people would suddenly go quiet. When the progenitors investigated, they found cities full of bodies. Not killed, but consumed from within. The hologram shifted to show what looked like medical scans. Alien bodies with something dark spreading through their veins like poison. It corrupted them, Vorath continued. Changed them at a cellular level. Made them turn on each other, destroy their own infrastructure, sabotage their own defenses. By the time a world went silent, the inhabitants had torn apart everything they'd built. And then the silence moved on to the next target. That's impossible, Lily breathed. How can something do that? What kind of weapon, what kind of disease could work on every species the same way? That's the terrifying part, Quinn said. It's not a disease. It's not a weapon. The progenitor's best scientists studied it for decades. Near as they could determine, the silence is conscious. It's alive. It's a form of intelligence so alien, so fundamentally different from biological life, that it sees consciousness itself as an infection that needs to be cleansed. Ambassador Kess spoke up from where she'd been studying the data. The progenitors realized they were the primary target. Their technology, their knowledge, their very existence posed the greatest threat to the silence. It was coming for them specifically, and it wouldn't stop until they were erased. The timeline shifted again, showing something that made Lily's heart sink. Progenitor worlds going dark one by one. Not from the silence, but from the progenitors themselves. They made an impossible choice, Vorath said softly. They sterilized their own worlds. Destroyed their own cities. Scattered or sealed every piece of technology they'd created. They committed species-wide elimination to save everyone else. But why? Lily asked, tears stinging her eyes. Why would killing themselves help? Because the silence hunts consciousness, Quinn explained. Specifically, advanced consciousness. The more intelligent, the more technological, the more curious a species becomes, the brighter they shine to the silence. The progenitors realized that by making themselves extinct, they would remove the silence's primary target. It would have nothing to hunt. And eventually, it would go dormant again, waiting. But before they died, Kess added, they seeded Earth. One last world, hidden in a remote corner of the galaxy that the silence had never reached. They locked their genetic legacy behind evolutionary firewalls, made humans look completely natural. They set up conditions that would only trigger when humanity reached a specific level of development. Lily's mind was racing. The relics. I was meant to activate them. Yes, Quinn confirmed. When humanity's population, technology level, and expansion into space matched the progenitor's parameters, the relics would recognize your blood. It was a timer. A message. And a warning. He manipulated the display one more time. Ancient progenitor text appeared, and the translation scrolled beneath it in English. Lily read it out loud, her voice shaking. When the heirs awaken and the relics sing, the silence will hear. It will know the hunt is not over. It will return. 5 cycles of the great will until it arrives. Prepare for the final war. The room fell deadly silent. 5 cycles, Vorath said. Based on the progenitor's astronomical measurements, we've calculated that to be somewhere between 5 and 20 Earth years. The relics are still calculating, trying to determine exact faster-than-light propagation patterns. Wait, Lily said, her voice rising with panic. Are you saying that when I cut my hand, when my blood activated those relics, I sent up a signal that's going to bring this thing here? That I just called down an apocalypse on the entire galaxy? No, Kess said firmly. The progenitors called it here. They set the parameters. They made you the key. You didn't choose this, child. But now you have to deal with it. Lily looked down at her scarred hand. She thought about her parents, probably sitting in some secure facility somewhere, terrified and confused. She thought about her friends back on Earth, going to school and complaining about homework, completely unaware that their species wasn't what they thought it was. She thought about the billions of humans and aliens across the galaxy who had no idea that something worse than any nightmare was coming for them. She was 15 years old. She liked bad music and staying up too late reading science fiction. She wasn't supposed to be responsible for saving the galaxy from an ancient horror that had terrified gods. But when she looked at the faces around her, at the fear and desperation in their eyes, she realized something. The progenitors hadn't chosen her specifically. But they had chosen humanity. They'd spent 3 million years preparing their children for this moment. And if there was even a chance that humans could succeed where the progenitors failed, then she had to try. The relics, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. You said they were a warning beacon. But the progenitors wouldn't have activated a warning without leaving us something to fight with. Where are their weapons? Their defenses? Their knowledge. Quinn's expression shifted to something that might have been respect. Scattered across hundreds of worlds. Locked. Dormant. Waiting for the right activation key. Lily held up her scarred hand, purple light shimmering faintly beneath the skin. Then let's stop wasting time. Show me where they are. 6 months. That's all it took to change everything. Lily Martinez stood on the observation deck of the weapons facility buried 3 miles beneath Europa's frozen surface, and she barely recognized herself in the reflection of the reinforced glass. She was taller now, her muscles more defined. Her eyes had taken on a faint purple shimmer that never quite went away. The progenitor genetic enhancers they'd found in the first cache had awakened sequences in her DNA that had been sleeping for 3 million years. She could run faster than Olympic athletes. Process information at speeds that made computers look slow. Heal from injuries in hours instead of weeks. And most importantly, she could interface directly with progenitor technology just by touching it, feeling its functions and purposes flow into her mind like downloaded knowledge. But she wasn't alone. Not anymore. Behind her stood 15 other humans, each one transformed by the same enhancements. They'd come from all over Earth once the news broke. And the news had broken big. You couldn't keep something like this secret. Within days of the council session, every human on Earth knew the truth. They weren't just another species that got lucky and figured out space travel. They were the children of gods, hidden away and waiting for their moment. The reaction had been mixed. Some people celebrated, claiming they always knew humans were special. Others panicked, afraid of what it meant. Religious leaders had conflicting interpretations. Scientists worked around the clock trying to understand their own biology. And millions of people lined up at testing centers, wanting to know if they carried the full progenitor legacy or just traces. Most humans had trace amounts. Enough to make them slightly better learners, slightly faster healers. But a small percentage carried the complete genetic package. The science, people started calling them the true heirs. And now 16 of them stood in a facility that had been waiting since before humans learned to make fire. This is really happening, said Jake Chen, a former pilot from Taiwan who'd scored off the charts in every test. He ran his hand along the surface of a ship that had been sitting in this hangar for millennia. The vessel responded to his touch, its hull rippling like liquid metal, reshaping itself around his hand. We're about to fly progenitor warships. They're not just warships, corrected Beth Rodriguez, who'd been an engineer before all this. Her military precision had made her the group's unofficial tactical leader, though Lily suspected that had more to do with Beth being able to keep her cool when everyone else was freaking out. Every system in these ships is designed for one thing: surviving a war with the silence. The progenitors built these for the fight they knew was coming. Lily placed her hand on the central console, the main interface for the entire facility. It was enormous, stretching 20 feet across, covered in symbols that glowed purple at her touch. The moment her skin made contact, information flooded her mind. Not words exactly, but concepts and memories and knowledge that felt like it had always been there, just waiting for her to remember. She gasped, her knees buckling. Jake caught her arm, steadying her. You okay? He asked, concern clear in his voice. They're not just memories, Lily said, her voice distant. I can feel them. The progenitors. Their fear. Their determination. They knew they were going to die, but they kept working anyway, building these weapons, encoding their knowledge, leaving everything they could for us. She pulled her hand away from the console, and the connection broke. The loss of it felt like saying goodbye to family she'd never met but somehow loved. The calculations are complete, she announced, her voice stronger now. The silence detected the relic activation. It's changing course. We have 4 years. Maybe 5 if we're lucky. The room fell silent. 4 years sounded like a lot of time, but to prepare for a war against something that had terrified the progenitors at the height of their power? It might as well be 4 minutes. Through the facility's massive viewport, they could see the joint fleet assembling in Europa's orbit. Human ships flying alongside alien vessels, working together in ways that would have been impossible a year ago. The revelation about humanity's origin had changed everything. Some species were grateful, viewing humans as the return of the wise teachers who'd uplifted their ancestors. Others were terrified, seeing humans as a threat or a harbinger of doom. But most understood what Lily had realized months ago: this wasn't about human versus alien anymore. This was about all conscious life in the galaxy versus something that wanted to erase consciousness itself. The fleet looks good, said Tommy Blake, the youngest scion at just 13 years old. He'd been a gaming prodigy before all this, and now his talent for pattern recognition and strategic thinking made him invaluable for tactical planning. We've got 200 ships so far, with more coming every week. The Keldori are manufacturing shield generators. The Theks are producing weapons based on progenitor designs. Even species that have been enemies for centuries are working together. It won't be enough, Beth said bluntly. She pulled up tactical displays showing what little they knew about the Silence's capabilities. The progenitors had thousands of ships, technology centuries ahead of what we can build even with their blueprints, and they still lost. We're essentially cavemen trying to build fighter jets. The progenitors weren't cavemen, Lily countered. And they didn't have what we have. What's that? Jake asked. Diversity. Lily gestured to the viewport, to the fleet of wildly different ship designs, each one reflecting the unique engineering philosophy of its species. The progenitors were brilliant, but they were one people. One way of thinking. They couldn't imagine solutions outside their own framework. But look at us. Humans grew up on Earth, isolated, having to fight and adapt to survive on a world that was constantly trying to kill us. And when we finally got to space, we found dozens of alien species, each one with completely different perspectives and approaches to problems. She turned to face her fellow Science. The progenitors ran because they couldn't imagine a way to win. We're not running. Because we're too stubborn, too diverse, too weird to accept that there's no solution. Humans spent millions of years surviving ice ages and predators and diseases and disasters. We're really, really good at not dying. Beth actually smiled at that. Fair point. We are annoyingly difficult to kill. The facility's alarms chimed softly, a notification rather than an emergency. Director Voratha's hologram appeared in the center of the room. Science, he said, using the title that had become official. We've located another cache. Northern section of Mars, buried under the Tharsis region. Early scans suggest it contains what the progenitors called enhancement chambers. Technology that can accelerate the activation of dormant genetic sequences. Lily's heart rate picked up. How many people could it enhance? If the records are accurate? Potentially millions. We could awaken the progenitor legacy in a significant portion of humanity. The implications were staggering. Right now, there were only a few hundred humans with fully activated abilities. But millions? That would change everything. It would also make humanity even more of a target, but that ship had already sailed the moment Lily's blood hit that first crystal. We need to move carefully, Beth warned. The more humans we enhance, the brighter we shine to the Silence. We could be accelerating its arrival. Or we could be building the army we need to fight it, Jake countered. They both looked at Lily. Somehow, despite being the youngest of the tactical team and definitely the least qualified, she'd become the person everyone looked to for final decisions. Maybe it was because she'd been first. Maybe it was because her blood seemed to resonate with the relics more strongly than anyone else's. Or maybe it was just because someone had to make the call, and nobody else wanted the responsibility. Lily thought about her parents. They were on Mars now, relocated to a secure facility after testing revealed they both carried moderate progenitor markers. Her dad had taken the enhancement treatments, slowly activating his dormant abilities. Her mom had refused, saying someone in the family should stay normal. Lily called them every day, when she had time between training sessions and relic activations and preparing for a war against cosmic horror. She thought about her old life. School and homework and worrying about whether Jake from astrophysics class liked her. That version of herself felt like someone she'd known a lifetime ago, even though it had only been 6 months. And she thought about the progenitors, working frantically in their final days, knowing they were going to die but doing everything they could to give their children a fighting chance. Activate it, Lily said firmly. Every human who wants the enhancement should have the choice. We tell them the truth, tell them the risks, and let them decide. The progenitors didn't make us to hide. They made us to finish what they started. She walked to the viewport, placing her hand against the cold glass. Below, Europa's icy surface stretched out for miles. Above, the stars glittered against the blackness of space. And somewhere out there, moving faster than light, something ancient and terrible was coming. But it would find them ready. It would find humans and aliens standing together, armed with the weapons and knowledge of the progenitors. It would find a galaxy that had spent 3 million years growing stronger, more diverse, more resilient. The Silence had made the progenitors extinct. But humans weren't progenitors. Humans were survivors. Humans were fighters. And humans were really, really bad at accepting that something couldn't be beaten. 4 years, Lily said quietly, her breath fogging the glass. Let's make them count. Behind her, the other Scions moved to their stations, beginning the activation sequences for weapons and ships that hadn't been used since before human civilization existed. The war was coming. But this time, the progenitor's children weren't running. This time, they were bringing the fight. Retry.